ready to talk hockey. Streaming from the Oilers Live Studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Hey, it's Michael here for Oilers Live. First comment's already in. Shannon on Facebook says, I started drinking after this one, boys. Record for first comment tonight. Anyway, welcome to the show. I've got as my guest Mr. Rob Soria. He is contributor over at the Copper and Blue. Fellow Oilers fan. Great follow. You can follow him at oil_drop. Welcome to the show, Rob.
My pleasure, sir, and thank you for having me.
Yeah.
That was a tough one tonight.
It was a tough one tonight, and yeah, I'm sure people will have lots to say in the chats tonight, as they have had on Twitter and everywhere else. You watch the Oilers. Lots right away on YouTube. What a joke of a loss. What do you guys think? I mean, we're going to tell you what we think. Well, I guess let's start with that, Rob. That's as good a place to start as any. Your sort of initial thoughts of the game tonight.
Well, I think going in with the effort they put through yesterday against the Avs, we knew this one could be iffy, to say the least, right? That said, they came out, played really well in the first. Were probably unfortunate not to score a couple of goals. Koskinen, despite giving up a couple of goals in the second, played really well, kept them in it. And then they just, some blunders at the end. It's funny, both sides made some mistakes. But the Oilers coughed it up late. People in the fan base need to once in a while step back a little bit. 2 points would have been great out of these two games. They got one. That's disappointing. But again, it's funny. Today would probably be one of the games where I would say we saw a blunder from the coaching staff, be it Woodcroft or Manson, whatever the case may be. I don't get on the tying goal why they left that. Well, even the first line I wouldn't have left out, but that D pairing, sorry, those guys, Nurse was awful tonight. It was just, he had an awful game. I just couldn't see why you would put them right back out after that, just asking for trouble. But all in all, man, they're what are they, 12-6-2 in 20 games? Like, what is there to complain about? Like, there's nothing to complain about.
Yeah, I was thinking it's always hard to it's hardest to stream when the Oilers are on a win streak because you got less to talk about, right? So a game like tonight, like we've had, we had the stretch of 5, of course, and then I thought we played well enough to potentially win the game against Colorado, which is crazy, right? Because everybody wrote this team off, only 3 weeks ago. In fact, they still were writing this team off, all the, so-called analysts around the league. I listen to a lot of NHL media. And, leading up to that game last night, everybody was saying Colorado was a shoo-in. In fact, I hate naming names, but there was one guy on Sirius that called it in the first period. He said the game would be over by the end of the first. So, hey, look, we got to be happy with that. 1 point out of 3, out of a possible 4 points. The next two, at this time of year, you got to start breaking them down into, 5-game increments. And so, now we've got another 2 important games coming up. San Jose, who's right now leading Calgary. So they're not going to be an easy win, but you got to come out. It's at home. I think Oilers have been playing great at home. They got a couple new guys in the lineup and potentially Nugent Hopkins back. It's we've got to see. I think it's funny because everybody's already seen the graphics and saw the stats on how the team's changed their fortunes on 5-on-5.
Yeah.
It's kind of hilarious when you think about the expense on the power play though. But they have to adapt when Nuge is out of the lineup. But it'd be nice to see him back. How big do you think he's going to be for this team going forward? I mean, just like on the power play itself.
Well, on the power play, I don't know, because the power play sucked while he was there too.
Yeah, fair
So
enough.
let's not kid ourselves, right? So I think part of the power play issue is, again, they fall so in love with that one play, and you could see tonight, like Dallas was just giving them the point. They're like, shoot, go ahead. And until they do something with that, it doesn't matter who's on that power play. Like Nuge will help, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I think honestly he'll probably be a bigger help on the penalty kill. God knows they need that. I was pretty excited to see McDavid out there for a little bit, and then Draisaitl at the end there, and it got him 2 goals. But for Nuge, I honestly think the only way the Oilers will have a chance against any of the better teams is rolled in 3 lines. And without him, they can't roll 3 lines. Where I'm kind of curious to see is, I'm assuming that shoulder was separated. So he stunk in the face-off circle to start off with. So you're going to need either McLeod or Broussard on his wing at all times. Maybe Ryan too, I guess. So we'll see. Yeah, he's going to be key for sure. But the one, I'll say this, just to kind of jump around a little bit, but to kind of stay on that as well. I was kind of surprised how little McLeod played tonight. He literally had him as his 4th line center. And I just don't know if that's the ideal thing to be doing. Like, I'd rather get that kid going and keep going, right, for when Nuge comes back. Because if the plan is to use him as a 4th line center, I don't know if that's, excuse me, the best of his, the best usage for him. And Woodcroft doesn't strike me as someone who would do that, but we'll see.
Yeah, interesting. So here's something that occurred to me. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on Puljujarvi's game, because he just doesn't. He's looking to pass the puck at the most inopportune times, and this guy's got a shot. That's why they drafted him. That's what they talk about him. You can't have him on the same line as Hyman. Nuge coming back changes that a little bit. Maybe you can split those 2 guys up. But I was, the one thing that surprised me, it was, McLeod didn't get a lot of time. I thought maybe at some point when it was clear that Puljujarvi wasn't going to shoot the puck tonight, I thought maybe we might see McLeod get bumped up and play a couple shifts, with Hyman and Draisaitl or something like that. We didn't see that. Yeah, I think somebody's really got to kind of whisper in Puljujarvi's ear. He's got to shoot that puck. Like, he's got the means. He's in the right spots. Like, he had the opportunities tonight. If he'd shot the puck, we might be up another couple.
True, but I think you and me both know, be it from watching sports, playing at whatever level you play at, it's confidence, man. He was struggling from a scoring standpoint before he got hurt. Honestly, it sucked that he got hurt when he did, because once he had that one bounce off his foot, that was probably what he needed. The thing with Yessa is he still does a lot of other stuff, right? Last game was disappointing that I saw he played when you went back, and it seemed like it, but then when you checked into the minutes, he actually played a lot less 5-on-5.
Yeah, he didn't play a ton. Yeah.
No, and tonight they kept, like you said, that regular rotation, and I don't think they can really mess around with it, right? They got to get him going. But again, even tonight, I think there were at least 2 times, if not 3 times, like you said, where he should have taken shots. But again, pretty good in his defensive end a couple of times, drew that last power play. So he's still doing stuff, but you're not wrong. If he's going to be in that spot, he's got to do stuff, right? Like offensively. But on the flip side of that, look at Yamamoto now and consider what Yamamoto was doing, 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, where wasn't it 3-4 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, and everyone was saying about how he had 1 shot in 5 games or whatever that nonsense was, right? And that was all confidence. So, I think that's where Puljujarvi is as well. But they got to get him going. because without that dude, he's far too important for this team. And those people who are like, he can't skate and he needs to hit people. That's not how he plays. At least not yet.
Don't get me wrong. I love Puljujärvi.
Oh, I know you do.
He's got the skills, right? Like he deserves to be top 6.
Yep.
He's not playing like it today, and that he can be back there. You're right. Confidence is a big part of that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's just it. And we see on that old Twitter circle, it goes all over the place with him. And that's just how this always was, from when he first came to when everyone loved him at the start of the year, when he's their Bison King. And then as soon as he hits a patch, it's like, this guy stinks. It's like, well, take it easy. Enjoy what you have. That's what I say to some Oilers fans. I get they're frustrated, but the kid's a player.
And, there's a lot of things he does that I don't think, he gets credit for, right? And he spends a lot of time in the offensive zone. Sometimes you wonder how he does it. It's just the same as Yamo. Sometimes you wonder how he gets the puck the way he does, right? Like, a guy of his size and stature. And Yamo's firing on all cylinders right now. He's got a lot of confidence. Playing with McDavid sure helped him. But that line... What do you think of that McDavid, Kane, Yamo line? I mean, getting hot at the right time, obviously.
Yeah, I'm one who I prefer to see Puljujärvi on the top line, but right now you can't. Yamo's just hot, so you ride it. Like the kid can't do anything wrong at the moment. He's got pucks just hitting him, going in. He can't make any wrong plays. He's getting under the Avs skin yesterday as an entire team, and he's like 2 foot nothing.
Yeah.
So Kane's the one. It's funny with Kane because I've been a Kane guy since Winnipeg, since he left Winnipeg. I've always wanted Kane here. I think you and I are on the same thing with Kane. Neither of us were extremely thrilled with him coming for obvious reasons.
Yep.
I'm still not. Am I at all surprised he's scoring at the clip he is? No. The dude's a hell of a player.
Yeah.
Yes, he's limited in certain things he does, but he's a shit disturber and he can score. So, and he's never played with guys this good. And I don't even think he's playing that well yet. That's the frightening thing.
Yeah, he seems to still be coming up to speed. Like he's getting better and better as every game progresses. 100% right. I'll be the first to admit that, I thought the signing was a bad idea. And I'm happy to be wrong about that right now, right? As long as he keeps his head, above water and keeps doing the right things. And look, I argued with somebody that he's never done it before. Like he won't stay good long enough. I'm beginning to think I was wrong about that too. I think that he can keep this pace and this demeanor, I think, till the end of the season. I think he can do that. Yeah. I think he'll be able to do that long enough to get the contract he wants and deserves. Mm-hmm. I know there's Oiler fans out there that are screaming to re-sign Kane. My thought right now, and maybe I'll be wrong, maybe I'll eat my words, but I just can't see it happening. I mean, he's not going to stay here for less money. The guy needs money, and he's going to get it. Somebody's going to, D'Angelo got a contract. Like, guys get contracts in this league. Doesn't matter who they are. Kane got a contract. Didn't matter who he was. He's going to get, $7-8 million, maybe more next season. And the Oilers can't fit that into the roster. There's just no way, unless if the cap went up significantly.
No. And I don't know if he'll get to that level. His ability from a scoring standpoint would probably suggest he probably could. But do I think he gets somewhere between 5 and 6 mil? Probably. Do you honestly think the Oilers aren't going to look at it? Of course they are. Let's not get ourselves.
Oh yeah, for sure they
should. They? No, they should not.
Yeah, right? and that's the thing. You take a chance. It's kind of like that's my concern, right? Is it's a chance, right? It's It was in hindsight, it was a great deal. Holland did the right thing, right? He took a chance on little to nothing and understanding the way the trade market would be at the deadline, right? Like nobody's giving him credit for that. We probably should. I mean, he deserves some credit somewhere.
For sure. But I think the problem he has, and the Oilers as an organization have had at times, they don't sometimes recognize or understand it's totally cool to say thanks and go your separate ways. Like it really is.
Yeah.
I've been on the Mike Smith thing since last year, like while he played excellent. And 90% of people said I was insane. How do you not bring him back even to be the backup? And I was like, well, no. Even on a 1-year deal, no. You give the dude huge props for what he did last year and probably the last half of the year before. But like at some point, my whole thing, and I can't remember, I think I said it with maybe a week left in the season, never mind the playoffs.
Yep.
I was like, if they genuinely looked at signing Smith, they'd lost the plot. And that's exactly what they did. And in my opinion, that has so hampered this team this year, along with as we know what the Keith thing was, whether you like Keith as a player or not. And those decisions, I think, kind of outweigh everything else. Because the Kane thing, I agree, it was from a hockey standpoint, it cannot be argued. Like it can't. From a non-hockey standpoint, it can certainly be argued. But that's something different, right?
So. Yeah, 100%. You know, the Smith thing's an interesting one for me, and you're right about one thing, and I think it's a mentality in Edmonton, and it's come by honestly, which is sign people when you can, right? Like if they want to come and you got to pay a little bit of a premium, you sign them. Every GM sort of dealt with that over the years here, and some of it's, I think, a little bit fear-driven. Like, you got to ask yourself, if Smith didn't sign with Edmonton for 2 years at 2.2, where would he be playing and for how much, and what would that contract look like? And I guarantee you it's not 2 years and 2.2 anywhere.
Nope.
And so why are you, signing him for above market value, right? If you're going to sign him at all, which, I'm all right with them signing him for a year as a backup. I'm all right with that. If, 2.2 is too high, in my opinion. It could have been lower, and to me that's just, it's guys they talk about hometown discounts. That's not a hometown discount. That's like here we're going to give you a bonus on signing, right? Like that's not a discount at all. There's
hometown discount there. Here is McDavid and Draisaitl. Those are your hometown discounts.
That's 100%, right? And 100%. I think. It's just that sort of mentality that if we don't sign them now, they're not going to be here, right? And for the first time, I think that Kane thing was a good thing, but I figure he came more for the McDavid connection than he did for the money by any stretch. Yeah,
he's no dummy. He knows what he's doing. He saw the opportunity for what he could do. And then, like you said, the bodies around him, like where's he going to be able to go play with guys like that?
Yeah. There's not, and he's taken full advantage of it. He's done well. I mean, he's had a few games in a row that he's looked super good. He's starting to pot the puck in the net, just like at will, it would seem, and he's in the right spot. So what do you think about? Okay, this is kind of a two-parter. Jay, of course, grew up with McClellan as coach, and McClellan would commonly put McDavid out on the PK. In fact, I was at a game in Buffalo when Edmonton was there, and McDavid and Draisaitl started the PK, and I was, you just watched the two of them fly out of there on the PK, and they'd either come close to scoring a shorty every game, or they would score a shorty. But then at the same time, you you don't want McDavid blocking shots. I firmly believe that. I do in some ways believe your best players can play the PK, but at the same time, I'm all right with giving McDavid a little bit of a rest on those PKs. Tonight, though, he goes in and just kind of out of the blue puts McDavid out there. Like, to me,
worked.
Yeah, it worked. Like, to me, that's the trick. That's the killer right there. It's not about playing McDavid all the time. It's about putting him out there when it's not expected. Yeah. And he shot out of a cannon, which McDavid quite often does. Yeah. And the only downside to that was he didn't score it himself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's interesting because guys my age who watched the dynasty years, you're accustomed to it, right? But it's different hockey now. Those guys all killed penalties, especially on the Oilers. They had other guys who did it, but all the main guys killed penalties, and that made them lethal shorthanded, right? And it was exactly what we saw tonight. That's exactly what the Oilers did in the 80s. But you're right. They can't do it on a full-time basis. Plus, this league, especially this Oilers team, they love fourth-line penalty killers, which I don't understand. They all seem to want like 4 to 6 guys on their team who can kill penalties. If you have like a couple of sets, let's say, and for the Oilers, as an example, Draisaitl's one of them, and so is Nuge. So 2 of your best players are on there already. Really, you only need 1 or 2 more, right? That are good at it. And I don't know, like Puljujarvi, I've been talking about this since he came here. He was good at it in junior. Let him do it. He's a big boy too. Instead, the nonsense of like we have Yamamoto at times on the power play and Shore, these guys are like 2 foot nothing. They can't get their sticks in the lane because they're not big enough. And the system they play doesn't help, right? So I'm all for star players getting time on the penalty kill. I always have been. But you're probably right. What we saw today is probably more of what we should see. And it doesn't always have to come at the end of the power play or on the penalty kill, I mean. You can throw them out for a 20, 30-second hit at any point. The end of it works best. It's easiest. But why can't you throw them out there with a minute and a bit on a face-off? And like you said, if they get the puck and they move it up ice and you do that, well, even if you don't score, you at least get it out of your end and your penalty kill stinks. So I don't see any harm in it, right? You're right about the blocking shots, but to be honest, that can happen at any point of the game, right? So, and let's not kid ourselves. How many of these forwards actually block shots?
Yeah. No,
none of them do. Maybe Devin Shore.
No, maybe
Nurse is the guy who likes blocking shots.
Yeah, and he kind of missed that one on the 2-on-1 tonight.
Yeah,
that kind of was his night tonight.
Yeah, it was ugly.
Yeah, it was ugly. I mentioned it to some of the heavy hockey guys. That kind of like was the epitome of the night. That slide where it kind of stopped about 2 feet from the net. I don't know what.
Awful.
I thought he was ready to have a nap by the time he got there. Oh, that was him and Cece had a rough night.
Yeah. You know what? I really feel bad for Nurse at times. He's a really good defenseman. He's obviously not a $9 million defenseman. That goes without saying. But he's the Oilers' best defenseman. And he's not really a genuine number 1 horse. Yeah, you can play minutes because he's just, he's a fabulous athlete.
Yeah.
But we saw it again tonight, right? Cody Ceci isn't a top pairing defenseman. No. Cody Ceci is a push probably as a 3-4, right? But in order for Ceci to work in that spot, you need a guy to carry him. Well, Darnell can't carry anyone. And that's not a knock on the guy. He's like a really good number 2 defenseman.
Yeah.
Who's being asked to be a number 1.
Yeah. He's kind of in between in my mind.
I agree.
I think you're right, and that's exactly where he's playing, right? And the fact is we don't have a lot of really solid defensive depth on this team. There's a lot of offensive defensemen, but you can only do so much with that. I thought one of our best defensemen tonight, oddly, was Russell. On both sides of I was sure he was going to score tonight. I felt like this was the night, but adding in Kulak, maybe now's a good time to switch to this deadline day.
Yeah.
I guess first off, because this is my first episode, the Oilers live episode since the deadline. I talked about it with Dash and Mike and Ryan on Straight Off the Pipe, but what's your thoughts on the deadline, acquisitions, trades, etc.? I gave Holland a B rating, and so if you were to give an A to an F, what would be your grade for how he did, and what are your thoughts?
From an expectation standpoint, I probably would give it a B because I wasn't expecting more than what they did.
Yep.
Right. The piece I wrote over the weekend at Copper and Blue, I pretty much stated as much that would they get a depth forward? Would they get a depth defenseman? If they got a goalie, we all knew it wasn't going to be a good one. It would just be like either on par or below. So it would be a depth goaltender, right? I would say a B-ish, maybe a B- because that's what it was.
Yeah.
I get some people saying he overpaid, and I agree he did for Kulak, but again, they ate half that contract. And like it or not, that's how that works. And also, like it or not, Kenny's not the one who's gonna, barter that down. It's just not his MO.
Yeah.
Though to be fair, I'm sure the Canadians could have probably traded Kulak somewhere else for something similar, right? So how I look at that part of it is I honestly think, and I think we saw it tonight, if you actually look at the minutes on the back end, it's funny because as bad as Nurse was, you would have thought he played like 27 minutes. And he most certainly did not. I think he was just under 21, which is pretty rare when I last looked. So I don't know if that was the last update for the night, but I think it was. But if you look at them, there were a bunch of them in and around that area. And how I look at it is Kulak and Keith, call them whatever the hell you want. You can call them second pairing, third pairing. It really doesn't matter. If both of those dudes can play 18-ish minutes a night and leave Darnell 24-ish, well, whatever. Have at her. That's I don't see how that's a bad thing. So the ad I think was as good as he was going to do.
Yeah.
So I got no problem with that. As far as Brassard goes, he's depth, man. And I know some people are like, I think some saying he might not play. I don't know about that. What would really confuse me with the Oilers, and maybe they might do it, I just don't see how you can play Archibald. Like, why would you do that to your lineup? The in and out. Like, they might, but once all these guys are healthy, they got to settle on something. And Cassian should be one of the guys who comes out, but that will not occur, and we all know that.
Yeah.
Just from a standpoint of they want size, they want toughness, they want this, and that. But he doesn't bring any of that on his own, right? So the addition of Brassard I really like because, he can win faceoffs, he can play the wing, and he's been a good player in this league for a while. And he's not Kyle Turris, who can't play anymore.
Yeah, he is not. Yeah, right? I mean, that might be the statement right there, right?
Yeah.
He's not Kyle Turris. Yeah.
And I think from what we've seen from him in recent years, he's settling into the role of what the Oilers need.
Yeah.
And secondly, this is his 10th team, I think, or 11th team or whatever it is. So he gets how this works.
Yeah.
He can fit into dressing rooms. He'll do what he has to do. From people I've talked to and what I've read, I've never seen a bad word about the dude. So that should be a good thing at this time of year, right?
Yeah, Josh from Tough Call Pod used to do some work writing about the Penguins when Brassard was there. and was pretty high on him.
Yeah.
Having a chance to watch him play a fair bit, and so I think I think that I look, yeah. I mean, you said it. He's not tourist. I think he's got the potential to be what we hoped Fogle would be, right? And just hasn't quite, panned out. And talk about confidence. I mean, I could see Fogle at the right time going on a hell of a streak. I mean, he had that chance tonight. Nothing was more telling than when they panned over to him on the bench and the look on his face, right? That just exasperation of not being able to, pot that puck in the back of the net when he had the chance. And I think Brassard, though, like, he's the kind of guy, if you're going to go into the playoffs, he's the kind of guy you want, right?
Yeah.
Like a guy that is just solid. He's just going to play the role that you want him to play up and down the lineup. He knows what he's here for, right? He knows he's here to play depth. He's going to play depth and do that. The one thing that stands out to me about Kulak is every time I've watched the Canadians play, I notice him in a way, like in a good way, right? Not not in the way that you say, when people talk about not noticing a defenseman, but I notice him in the good way. Like, he's tough to play against. He's, he gets in there. He does a lot of things well. He's not, look, nobody's going to lie and say he's a top line guy. But he's definitely a guy that should be in the lineup every night. And,
for sure.
And that's what we need. We need a guy, that would be in the lineup every night, and we just haven't had that. We need that one extra on the depth side. So I like those two. I'm all right with what they gave up, given the fact that for once we're not eating the whole salary, and the way that Holland made it work, right? Like that he got, and just like you, I think we talked about it sort of pre-deadline was, you can't expect much. In fact, the prices were too high. In a lot of ways, I started to get initially, I'd say about a month ago, I was thinking when Holland came out and said, I'm not trading my first rounder, I thought, you son of a bitch, right? Like, like, get out there, do your job, trade what you got to trade, make this team competitive. They've got to win a round. And I think especially now, given their place in the standings, the expectation is they come out of that first round. But this team's not a contender for the cup this year.
No.
And so if you're gonna put, I hate to quote Berkey, but he says it every time they ask him. He says there's only one Stanley Cup, and guys are trading first rounds all over the place for one Stanley Cup, right? Like, don't get too crazy. And I'm glad Holland didn't get crazy in this instance.
An honest question for you going into the season, honestly, what was your expectation for this team?
Fighting for first in the
I don't care about the regular season. It doesn't matter. To me, these guys
to be
are
a
like
contender. That was my expectation, was this team would be a contender. That going for the cup. Well, you know what? I
that goaltending?
No, well, and here's the thing is I wanted them to be a good regular season team, contend enough that at the trade deadline they could make the right plays to make them a contender for the cup. Yeah. And I think and the goaltending was always a thing. And here's the part that, here's where Holland gets an F. Guys like Treliving get an A+, because they work, Treliving's working the phones, earlier, doing more, trying to be creative. Holland is, he's a little bit more patient. He's a wait and see guy. And frankly, and I said this before, Koskinen and Smith bailed him out at the trade deadline this year, right? They bailed him out because people would be a whole lot madder if they were still playing the way they were 3-4 weeks ago. But they had, a stretch of good games, and now he can kind of get away with saying, I don't think we need a goalie. Now, those of us, we know better. We know better. right?
No, for sure. But
we're
can
not
he
as
really
mad.
get away with it?
No, he can't.
I think he can right now.
He can right now. You're right.
But I think we're probably in agreement that if they play Vegas or LA, they should be able to win that series. But coming into this season, and I said at the start of the season, I'm not surprised that, granted, let's not kid ourselves, COVID and everything played into it. And part of the reason the Oilers stink as much as they did earlier in the year was COVID and because Tippett's stubborn. So once we remove those two things from the equation, my whole thing was, and I said this from the get-go, the Oilers could fight for first, and I honestly think they would have, and probably win a first-round series against one of these teams. Even with the Smith or Koskinen. But for me, like you, my hope and expectation, even though I knew it could not happen, was minimum for them to get to the Western Conference Final. So for me, if they win the first round, that's not good enough. Would I be surprised if they lose in the first round? No, I would not.
Yeah, that's the sad part, isn't it?
Right? And that's why I think, and you're right, that Holland can take it for now. But as well as Koskinen's playing right now, was he any better? Probably not than what Smith played last year. I would say no throughout the season. And did Smith not get outplayed in the playoffs? Again, I'm not saying Smith cost the Oilers the series against Winnipeg because he didn't, but they had the second best goalie on the ice every single game.
Yep. Yeah, no, 100%.
So
I mean,
how is that going to get fixed?
This was no surprise to anybody, and
I like Koskinen. I always have.
This reminds me. I don't know. Are you an Elks fan? I was going to say Eskimos, but are you an Elks fan?
Back in the day, I don't watch the CFL. I don't watch football as much as I used to.
Yeah, I used to. I watched it more too. But Machocha, right? Like Machocha.
Oh, yes.
He the guy would fail his way up the ladder.
He would,
right? Yeah, and did.
Yeah.
And this reminds me a lot of Holland. Like he's going to fail his way kind of up the ladder into a spot where, like we were worried about with Tippett after, like he started to win a couple of games right when you kind of had hoped maybe the Oilers might lose a couple so that he would have been gone a little sooner. Like Holland missed the opportunity to get Woodcroft in when we had a 2-week break and he could, develop some systems of his own and move Tippett out because, Tippett won a couple games, right?
Yeah.
So, that's the thing that just drives me nuts. What's going to happen, or could happen is Oilers brass will think, winning one round was sufficient enough for Holland to stay as GM. And we got to deal with this for a lot longer than we need to. And, and it's like success by accident. And it just drives me nuts. It's success. The accident is that we happened to get McDavid. We won a lottery draft and we happened to get Draisaitl. That's as good as winning a lottery because, everybody passed on him and he went and he fell as far as he did. Right. And you got those guys and it's just success by accident. There's no, rhyme or reason for why we should even be a contender. Nobody's done a good job GMing this team. And frankly, that's not a failure of the GMs anymore. That's got to go all the way up the ladder. And it's not, if we win a round, it's not going to happen. Right.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's funny because last week or the week before, I think it was when I heard Holland say something about how they have to grow from within. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like outside of Hyman, who on this team that is among their best players is not grown from within? Like who? Yeah. Hyman is the only one. Unless you want to put, I guess you can put CC and Keith or whatever if you want to. Like I think CC's been good this year, but just because he's their second best defenseman this year doesn't make him a really good player. Like for them it does. but for their key contributors, they're all homegrown. So, I know they want to percolate everyone, but let's not kid ourselves. There is a reason why Detroit percolated everyone back in the day, because there was no salary cap.
Yeah.
There's a cap now. And nothing's annoyed me more over the years as an Oilers fan through all this, through these times, especially their decade of darkness and all the other nonsense that people want to call it, of how they ruined guys. What guys have they ruined? They don't exist. Like, they don't. No one ruined Jeff Petrie. No one ruined Devin Dubnyk. Those guys were good players here, and they were good players when they left.
Yeah.
They just needed a change of scenery because of whatever. The one they came close to ruining was Justin Schultz, and they kind of, I think, maybe did. But so he never reached that level, but maybe he was never that good. But did the Oilers ruin Yakupov? Come on. Like, I love Nail as much as the next dude, but he was what he was. He was limited, and I think we saw that, right? But so, yeah, they go about it all wrong. And like you said, they've really fallen into it. And hey, would it surprise me if the Oilers got to the conference final? Yeah, it would. Can the Oilers get to the conference final? Yeah, they can, because of those two horses they have. If they get hot and a goaltender plays okay, and like you were mentioning before we got on here about Markstrom, let's say they play Calgary and Markstrom has a couple of crappy games. The Oilers could beat Calgary.
Yeah.
Would I expect them to? No. Could they? Yes. Then what? They get to the conference final and everyone's going to be like, what a great job. Well, no.
That's the accident part.
Yeah.
Right?
This isn't 06.
No. And if it were,
right?
it's still an accident. Right? Like,
but 06 wasn't even an accident.
Yeah.
06, they needed a goalie. If they would have had a goalie during the season, that would have been one of the best teams in the league.
There you go. Right? Like, there was the foresight to go out and find one. I mean, they knew the market for a goalie was not great this year anyway.
No, which is the frightening thing.
Yeah.
And you know what? And this is the thing that probably bugs me most, Michael, is that first rounder. I guarantee you he wanted to use it for a netminder. What baffles me, and this goes back to when he couldn't sign Kemper, right? Yep. So to think he could use it is all well and good. But my thing is, even at the start of the season, looking at the landscape across the league, who was he going to use it on? Like, outside of maybe Fleury.
Yep.
And I honestly think Fleury might have done Edmonton or Toronto if there was no pandemic. I really do, because I think he would have come to Canada, and I think that's the biggest reason why he wouldn't go to either or. But outside of Fleury, what goalie was there that he was going to go get? Like, teams aren't just giving you goalies in the middle of the season.
Yeah, nobody's going to. And after the Keith trade, we didn't really have a lot of space to do it without sending somebody back. And who's taking on Koskinen? Right? Like, that's the part that, I mean, it's, and he's got, the modified no trade, right? So
for sure, especially at the start of the season, you bet.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's, limited in where you can play him. And if he's smart and he doesn't want to get traded, then he just puts those teams in which he knows have active goalies that could possibly come over in return.
Yep.
Right? Like, if he puts Chicago on there, that deal's done. Right? And so 100%. People don't realize that. I mean, there's the thought that, you'd see Koskinen go the other way. Well, he had the option of putting those teams on there, and there were only 3 or 4, maybe 5 teams in the league that were going to trade goalies at all if they were, and so if he wants to stay in Edmonton or he doesn't want to move, then I do think though I think Koskinen is playing better under the Woodcroft system. It's a little bit it's a little bit more aligned with how he plays. I'm of two minds of it. I think that it's a little too late is my thinking on it, right? Like he had to deal with Tippett and Tippett's way for long enough, and then the pandemic I think really hurt him. It's kind of like the Lucic thing, right? Like he's never going to win now, right? Like
with the fan base and stuff.
Yeah, with the fan
never.
base and everything, and the contract, and
they could win the cup, man, and it wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, that's
still
exactly
wouldn't.
it, right? Like, so, it's kind of. I mean, I guess that's what it would take to have to keep him, to get him to stay for another year, right? Like they'd have to win the cup, and then even then, half the fan base would groan if they re-signed him. Yeah.
No, which is funny because the complete opposite happened this year with Smith, right?
Yep.
Which is funny.
Yeah. Well, it's not funny, but it's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, but the point you make is a good one with regards to under Woodcroft, because the Tippett thing goes without saying. It's got nothing. Part of it, I think, the last straw was him being thrown under the bus after the Ranger game. Yeah. But we all know, whoever's watched this team, that Tippett only played him and drove him into the ground whenever Smith was hurt.
Yeah.
Right. And he didn't have Smith to play. So he wasn't a fan, which is cool. But if you actually watch Koskinen play now, he actually looks very similar to what he looked like under McClellan. And to be honest with you, that's the best he's ever played as an Oiler. The next year he wasn't bad. And even under Hitch, he was fine. It fell apart late in the season because Hitch was riding him into the ground and that team was terrible. But if you look at Koskinen play, he's coming out of his net a lot more. He's a lot more square. He's not as scrambly. He never looks 100% confident. That's just kind of the way he is. It's just the goalie he is, right? He's not a puck stopper. He's a blocker. But I honestly think the best thing for the Oilers goaltending was Woodcroft. Because if it was to continue the way it would, I don't think he would have played Skinner, just being Tippett. I don't think he would have played Koskinen. I think he would have just kept playing Smith, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we'd be probably worse off for it. I don't think
probably.
Yeah, we wouldn't be where we are.
No,
today. Of course, Oilers fans, despite our excitement, one of the things we got to keep in mind is the reason we are where we are today has a lot to do with Vegas. Like absolutely getting decimated both on the injury front and just not winning any games, right? Like,
no.
I mean, they...
Well, it's funny because people talk about the Oilers, and I mentioned it earlier with regards to COVID and injury, but let's not kid ourselves. Like, Vegas has lost almost every imperative player on their roster. I like long-term or whatever. The Oilers, what did they lose? Yeah, they've lost some guys, Nuge for an extended period, but their two best players have basically played all year.
Yeah, if we're not ahead of Vegas in the standings, we're in the eighth wild card. We're in the second wild card spot, only because Dallas has played two less games.
Yeah.
Right? Like Dallas, I think I'm just looking right now. Their point percentage is higher than ours.
Do you think they catch LA?
LA won tonight.
Yeah. Lots of games still.
The game's still on. Second period. So
okay.
LA hasn't won yet. But they were up 3-0. It's now 3-1. I think that they actually have a shot. I think there's a lot of confidence on the team right now. I think they I feel the confidence. Like I watch them. I feel like tonight, being down 2-1, coming back and getting that 3-2, teams up and they're running. I'm actually glad they didn't lose it in such a way that it was like a 2-1 game where they didn't come back and get the lead for a bit, right? Like they got something to build on. even tonight. And it was just, they got the excuse second half of back-to-back, right? They're tired. They just finished playing easily the best team in the league, and they played a hard game going to overtime. Some of those guys played, 23 to 25 minutes. And so they had excuses built in tonight. And they came back and they still led the game for a little while. And so I'm all right with that. And it's like you said earlier, sometimes, the team's going to let out a stinker, and you got to be okay with the odd one. The key for me will be how they respond. I think, you see these next two games. The Calgary game actually means a lot to me. And not just because we're Oilers fans and it's the Battle of Alberta, but I mean, it's the fact they lost the last one. It's always an emotional game, right? And, we're going to have our full lineup. This will be a good indicator. And I think if we can come out of these next two with wins, back-to-back wins, I think we'll catch LA. Like, I think the team will come out of that with the confidence to catch LA, and we'll still have, I think if LA loses tonight, or if they win tonight, we're down by 3 with a game in hand. So, but I do feel like, if they can win the next two, they'll catch LA, and we'll finish second.
They have LA twice still?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
So, I think they're catching LA regardless.
Yeah.
What happens these next two games. But I'm also the guy after they lost to Calgary that I said they'd take 8 out of 10 points in their next 6, and everyone said I was insane. So
I would have told you you're insane. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, because you had to. For me, I looked at it a couple of different ways. They played pretty darn well on that road trip, and it was a pretty long road trip.
Yeah, they played great.
That had games mixed up coming to Edmonton, 1 in, 1 out. So it made it even longer. And they were hurt. The Montreal game was a disaster. But outside of that, they didn't play terrible. And you have to look at that schedule. Was I surprised they beat Tampa? Yes. No one likes to mention the fact that the Oilers are on the power play for half the game, which rarely happens, and it should, but it did that night.
Yeah.
So that played into it. They played really well against Washington. And then it's just confidence, right? So I think they're a confident enough group that if the goaltending holds up, that they can catch LA. I, like you, I guess, kind of sort of look at the Calgary game as I'm never one for measuring sticks per se during seasons, because in the regular season to a playoff, it just doesn't mean anything. But for the Oilers mindset, and especially I'm assuming Koskinen's going to play, for Koskinen's mindset, that might be big. But I really think the Oilers think they can beat Calgary. So I don't know if there's that doubt there that sometimes is the issue.
Yep.
I genuinely believe they think they can beat Calgary.
Here's a question that something I've said. What's your thought? If you had at the beginning of the season, before we played any games, and you could come into the season with the Calgary roster or the Oilers roster, what would you have taken?
Oh, coming into the season?
Yeah.
Oh, Edmonton's all the way.
Yeah.
Just obviously the Markstrom thing isn't ideal. That goes without saying. And let's not kid ourselves. How many Oiler fans last year were like, "Oh, thank God we didn't sign Markstrom."
I was in there. I was in that group.
Come on.
In that group.
So, but no, going into the season, I thought Calgary would be good because I think Sutter's a really good coach for what he does in the short term. Those guys bought in. You could kind of see it starting to happen prior to. He builds his rosters a certain way. Your goaltender has to be really good, and the star players have to buy in. So did I expect Calgary to be this good? No. Am I stunned? No. I think, like most people, I had Vegas probably taking the division, Oilers second, and I think Calgary third. And then I think I was saying LA and Vancouver I expected to push. So LA, I'm not terribly shocked. Vancouver being up and down, I am a little, but I really like Demko. I really like Demko last year too.
Yeah.
So, and that matters, man. Like having those goaltenders matter. So how about you for the Calgary Edmonton thing?
Yeah, I would have hands down taken Edmonton. And I was one of those people that laughed at the Markstrom contract after the season he had last year. I also 100% did not foresee the effect that Sutter would had on this team. Now,
Good
Sean,
coach, man.
Yeah. I mean, great coach. I just thought maybe it was a little long in the tooth for the game now, right? Like, and obviously I'm wrong about that. And he's got that team playing the style that he wants them to play, and they're obviously listening to him. And
I don't know if it'll last past this year. Maybe one more. That act won't last long with guys now.
And that's fair. And that's fair. Yeah. I think that's I mean, he had he's gonna go for it this year, obviously. Yep. And they're playing well enough that they they're in every conversation when it comes to who's potential to win the cup this year.
They're really good, man.
Yeah, Sean Patrick Ryan?
Yep.
I had him on the show a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you had a chance.
Yeah, I caught it actually when he was on.
Yeah, he said something that scared me and made a lot of sense to me, sadly, which is, he and Sean's a bit of a cynic sometimes, especially when it comes to the Oilers. But he figures that, if the Oilers don't do well at the end of this season, let's say they don't make it out of the first round, that Holland will make a change at head coach and bring in Babcock. And at first I thought there's no bloody way that he's going to do that. And then it occurred, and then he, said why. Obviously Sean's not hoping for that. That's not his wish, but he said it's because he's looking at Calgary and seeing the success they're having with an old guy in Sutter. And he's going to think, well, we can recreate that with my good friend, Babcock and bring him in. Yeah. You think there's anything to that?
Well, you never know. I hope not.
Yeah.
But the problem with Babcock is we already have, and granted, every situation is different, but we already have it. What happened with Toronto? And let's not kid ourselves. The Leafs are a lot deeper than the Oilers up front.
Absolutely.
They have been for a while, although the Oilers now, with some of the moves they've made and guys like Yamo and Yessa maturing, and then adding a guy like Kane, the Oilers, I think, are close.
Stop for half a second, because at the beginning of the season, lots of people, myself included, thought this was the deepest team we've had on the forward position in a very long time. But I found that Tippett absolutely squashed that. It's like he said, I don't want depth. I want to put everybody on the top line and then go into the game and run them to the ground.
Yeah.
It wasn't until, before he got canned and he played a couple of games putting Nuge on the third line, right, that we started to see this depth that the Oilers fans have come to expect. Now Nuge is injured, but when he comes back and having McLeod come up the way that he has and doing what he's doing certainly has helped. But I think the Oilers have a little bit more depth than we've been allowed to give them credit for, only because they haven't been played that way. And now we're not seeing Nuge in the lineup. So, and we just got Puljujarvi back.
Yeah, I agree. Like, again, I think the players the Leafs have are better. Like, not the top end guys.
Yeah. I mean, I still think you're right.
But let's not kid ourselves. You add a guy like Hyman, who's a good player, and he's had a really. I don't even think I think he's had an up and down year.
Yeah.
But he's a good player. Kane, again, good player. Yessi, Yamamoto. The other thing is, like you said, McLeod, and I give Tippett some credit because Tippett's the one who actually played McLeod at first. He did get some rope under Tippett. And you could see it, but the problem is, and I don't disagree with what you were saying with regards to what people were talking about. Oh, this is the deepest they've ever been in forever. But I viewed it and I know there were others in this boat as well, and it's part of the reason why I thought Tippett should have been canned in the playoffs, is we saw in the playoffs the monster that was created, in my opinion, in that time. For him to go down, like the Ethan Bear thing goes without saying, the benching and whatever, I think all of us are whatever with that, just confusing. But in that final game, to essentially just play Darnell Nurse like every other shift, when you had like 3 other healthy dudes on the bench, and then he did the same thing with the forwards, where he had like Shore playing in the top 6, and then he went through a stretch where he wasn't playing Puljujarvi, and then he played him on the third line. I think that was the kicker for most of us, where we looked at it and went, okay, this guy doesn't get it. Like, no matter how many pieces he gets. And I agree with you. As soon as the season started, we saw it again, and him going time and time again to the McDavid and Draisaitl thing. And for me, I think McDavid and Draisaitl should play every game together for a bit.
Yeah, like, 100%.
There's no reason.
Why wouldn't you?
There's no reason those guys shouldn't get a shift or two at evens every game.
Yeah. Even
every period, for all I care. Like, really, they should. And late in games, if you need to, go where you go like
you put your best players on the ice.
You do what you need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But every third game, and we saw it last year, the nonsense from Tippett at the end of the season where he was like, oh, we got to secure a playoff spot. I'm like, secure a playoff spot? I'm like, it's a 40-game season. You're not going to actually secure it until the last week and a half. And he's busy. I get McDavid. He wanted to get him to his points. I think McDavid would have got those points anyway. But they seem more interested in letting them, kill the likes of Ottawa, as opposed to building depth that could have possibly been useful against Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And let's not kid ourselves. Look at those 2 teams last year. Yes, I would say the Oilers kind of carried the play a little bit for sure during the series. But from a depth standpoint, Winnipeg is a better team. Like, they just were. They're not as talented, but from a depth standpoint, they're better. And also because Maurice isn't the greatest coach in the world, but he played his guys.
Yeah, he out coached Tippett, which has happened every playoff and in a lot of regular season games for that matter.
And not just in Edmonton.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, Tippett's a really good regular season coach.
Yep.
So,
but he got out coached on a number of occasions, and
oh yes,
and an example of we're talking about examples of good coaching today. That the idea to put McDavid out there on the PK, right? That's a coaching decision, a good coaching decision. There's just, you could go back and there's ample evidence of, like, he just seemed unprepared for the teams that came against the Edmonton, in certain games. Like, nobody'd watched any video. He didn't know who to play against who. And it just felt, like he was, he'd lost that knack, and whether he had that knack or not, to be fair, I didn't watch him a lot as a coach. I mean, he was stuck in Arizona, and let's be, like, they weren't my top team to pay attention to.
The funny thing I find with Tippett is how so much of the fan base, and even just regular Joe Schmo fan, is talking about timeouts. That says everything. Where even the casual fan is like, hey, that guy never took timeouts, right? And then when Woodcroft takes him, you're like, oh my God, like, what is going on?
Exactly, yeah, and they mean a lot. The other thing I thought, like you talk about, I always thought was a big thing is, as a team, you play if you're playing for the team, and the way Tippett ran the team, you felt like you were playing for Draisaitl and McDavid, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't feel very much like the team. I used to talk that players, no doubt would come from, the big club, go back to Bakersfield and talk about how much of an asshole he was. And just not want to play, right?
Yeah.
And nobody would have been happier than the guys in the AHL that Woodcroft was coming up and coaching the team. A guy that would play. If you're having a good game, he'll give you a couple extra minutes because you deserve it. You're having a good game, right? You
For
know,
sure.
you don't just give your top guys the extra minutes. And
Well, and at some point too, you got to give those guys a blow.
yeah.
That's the other thing. And like, it's weird because he's coached some good players. And like, I never wanted Tippett hired because I thought Tippett would really, like, I was in the boat where he was going to impose that defensive system, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of, not totally, but gave it more structure when he came in. And that first season, pre-pandemic, he did a lot of good things. Like, he really did. But he lost his mind against Chicago. And then he never relocated it. And part of the thing with him that frustrated me so much is how he put everything on Playfair. Because I don't think Playfair was that great of a coach anyway. But it's like, you're the head coach, man. It's like you if you want to change something, change it. Woodcroft will give all the credit in the world to Manson. But if he wants something done, he'll be like, hey, do this. And you got to wear that.
Take responsibility, right?
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And that's the one thing I really disliked about Tippett is, especially in the pressers, game days and stuff, and off days, he was different. Like, he would take stuff on his own. Post game, almost never. It was always something player wise.
Yeah.
Always. Like, every coach does it once in a while, but it never had the tinge where it's like, we got to be better from a coaching standpoint. It was always like they sort of thing from the player standpoint. I thought McClellan was really good with that too, back in the day too. And then as he got near the end, he started to do what Tippett did for a long time. And that wears on guys, right? And I'm sure the old school thing, and let's not kid ourselves, we all saw it once Woodcroft got there, not just from guys like Derek Ryan and Fogle and all those guys, because that goes without saying, but for them to switch the way they were playing as quickly as they did, I think it got to the point where, I think they just kind of had enough, because they were like, well, this is going nowhere.
Yep.
Whether they think he's a terrible coach or not, they're like, we're doing this, but where's it going to get us?
Well, they changed overnight, right? Guys don't change overnight unless if there's a challenge. All right, we got we're probably over time, which is fine. But let's chat about quickly chat about the upcoming San Jose game. They're of course coming off a big win. They were down 3-0, and I think down 2-0 early in that game against Calgary tonight. They came back, scored a couple quick goals to win the game 4-3. They're obviously not fighting really for a playoff spot. They're a long ways out. Maybe fighting for a lottery win at best. They've got Reimer and Kokkonen in net. What do you think's going to happen in this game? They still got, teams like San Jose always scare me because there's still some talent on that team.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
San Jose's one of those teams that always give them trouble, right? No matter how good or bad they are.
Like, you got Burns and Carlson on the back end, and if they have a good game, like, they can be outstanding if it seems to be, fewer in between or more games in between each if. And Hurdle and Couture, I mean, there's some big names on this team.
They got some good players.
Yeah.
And it sucked that Pavelski went to Dallas because the Oilers have always sucked against Dallas. And Pavelski's the Oiler killer. Yeah. So the thing that kind of frightens me is I wouldn't be surprised at all if Smith plays Thursday. Mm-hmm. And I'm still not sold on where that's going. Like, I really am not. Because I'm the guy who's been saying he's been hurt the whole time. And I still do think he's hurt.
Yeah, something's wrong with him. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And like you've played with guys who play goal.
Yep.
Anyone who plays with an injury, at some point you adjust. You physically make an adjustment, not in a good way, but you make an adjustment to make yourself play. I get those people who are like, oh, well, you shouldn't be doing that. It's to the detriment of the team. Well, that's not how an athlete's mind works. So he thinks he can help. And his last 2 games, like he literally had nothing to do against Buffalo, like literally nothing. But he played okay against Colorado. I didn't think he was terrible. But the thing that scares me about him is just still, even against Colorado, he looks like he just looks off in net. Like he's always played deep. He's always everything, but he's still lunging for everything.
Yep.
And when you lunge for everything, pucks are going to go through him. And if it goes through him, let's say he plays Thursday and he has a stinker, then where are you? Then you lose 3 in a row. And then you got that Calgary game you were talking about. That's
it becomes pretty important then.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm a little iffy. Should they handle San Jose? Yeah, they should rather easily. How they bounce back after losing this could be up and down. We'll see what Nuge can do. Like, the guys have played in what? How long has it been now? 5 weeks? 6 weeks? Feels like forever.
Yeah, I think more like 4. Maybe I'm wrong.
4?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it does feel like forever. I mean,
I forgot what he looks like.
Yeah. It'd be nice to have him back. Hopefully, gives the team a little bit of a kick.
What about you? What do you think against San Jose?
Yeah, I mean, I feel confident that the Oilers are going to win this one. But 100%, I mean, they have trouble with San Jose, and every team, like Calgary, who, we've talked about a lot tonight, had trouble with San Jose tonight. They've got the ability to score when it matters. There's talented players on that team that know how to put the puck in the net. You're probably right about Smith. I can tell you I was at a game once. I've been at a lot of games, but I was at a game where Smith, he got injured in the second period, and I had it from a very, very good source that he got injured in the second period and came out and played the third.
Yep.
And he knew full well, and it cost the Oilers the game that night. You could tell if you were watching for it, and I could tell you the point at which he got injured that game. And yet he still went out and played and cost the Oilers the game. And I think that's that's the word on him. He's a competitor, right? He's an athlete. Turco said it in the intermission tonight, right? Like, he just goes above and beyond. And look, I like it about him, but at the same time, it's not always to the benefit of the team. And I think in this instance, it's not to the benefit of the team. I think, if the right thing would have been to maybe get him some warm-ups in Bakersfield or where have you.
He's got to agree to that, though, right?
That's
Plus,
just
I don't think that
right?
would matter.
Yeah. I mean, that's just it. He'd have to agree to it, and he's not going to. And so, it is what it is. You have to play him against, I think you have to play him against San Jose, and you got to put the guy who's been getting you the wins against Calgary. Although there's something to be said about maybe putting Smith in against Calgary just for the emotional component, but I can't see that happening.
Yeah, that might have the opposite effect.
Yeah, it's very possible. So Smith is a big question mark, as goaltending always is with this team.
The new blood will be good, though.
Yeah,
I forgot about that because those guys should both play that game.
Yeah, and it's Calgary. They've got that Carpenter, which I wouldn't say changes that team drastically, but Kulak and Brassard, while they're depth guys, depth is exactly what this team needs, and that's a big change on this team.
Yeah.
So I hadn't heard that there was some discussion about Brassard not playing all the time.
Yeah, there's been a few people, not Oiler really, like not from them, but from fans and stuff kind of floating it out there. And some people are like, oh, if he doesn't dress all the time. And I'm kind of like, well, who would you play ahead of him?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So unless, of course, we're going to go to this where we're going to play Archibald every other game and we're going to dress guys that shouldn't be dressed. So, and again, like I get, and I know you're into the physical aspect of the game too. It's a part of the game. It's necessary.
Yeah.
And I think when teams are engaged that way, they tend to play better. And Archibald, I guess, kind of serves a purpose, but I don't know, like him in and out of the lineup, what does he bring you? Like he'll bring you a couple of hits in 5-6 minutes. And he's going to, again, as we talked about earlier with these penalty killers, I just don't see a need for it, right? So, and if you're going to do that, I'd rather Malone play, to be honest with you.
Malone's been excellent.
He's been fine.
Yeah, he's in fact another guy who never gets any credit, and a lot of times it's deserved. But I thought Shore had a decent game tonight.
Hey,
yeah.
Sure. I think we're all in that category with Shore. The guys who are like Shore's been excellent the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Like anyone says different. I don't know what they're watching.
Yeah. And, I mean, obviously he doesn't get a lot of love, but,
No.
He's done well. I would like to see them play. I'd like to see them play McLeod higher up than fourth line. And it surprises me a little bit, but, when Nuge is back, we'll see what happens.
Who do you think they pair Kulak with to start?
That's a good question. We've got, it's a good question, and who's coming out?
But you would assume Russell.
Yeah. But... So, is the Bouchard and Keith thing, is that, is it really working out? I'd say, it's not as great as, I mean, a lot of people were asking for that pairing for a long time. And
I'm one of them.
I was one of them. I just don't know that they've been great together. I consider even putting Keith and Kulak, although he's a lefty, but he can play both sides, is my understanding.
Yeah, I think Gregor hinted at it yesterday, and I don't disagree with him, is late in games or late in periods that they probably run with those two in CC if they're defending.
Yeah, and
those
your
two,
bottom
two
Nurse. Pair won't get much play, right? Yeah.
It would make – the thing is, if you run those two, then what do? Are you going to sit Bouchard or
you're sitting
Barry?
Yeah, I mean Bouchard you can't take out of the lineup. I don't see they
can't play together.
Yeah, they can't. No, they can't play together.
Could you imagine that?
It is. That's an interesting. I mean, maybe you.
That's tough to say because you could. I think it's fair to say that at least right now, Woodcroft is more comfortable with Barry over Bouchard. Most nights, and not just on the power play, at evens as well.
Yeah, but you know what? Barry's been all right defensively.
He's been better for sure.
Yeah, recently. I'm not gonna. He's not a stalwart defenseman by any stretch, but he's been better than advertised.
So then it comes down to who would Kulak or Keith help more, Bouchard or Barry, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it's kind of like tough to say. Plus he's new. So it's a toughie because I'm curious what they end up doing. And who knows, maybe at times, because honestly, this CC and Nurse thing is starting to not look as good lately.
Yeah, well, it right? A thought just crossed my mind. I mean, they had Barry up playing with Nurse for a while. I mean, you could throw that back and put Keith and CC back together, and then have Bouchard and Kulak play.
Potentially,
that's a possibility. I mean, a lot will depend on what happens in practice and how they look, and that. I'm sure they've got their ideas, but I actually wouldn't be surprised with that, especially after the game Nurse and CC had tonight.
Oof.
You want to, maybe see what goes. Who do you put with Nuge? Like, do you keep Puljujarvi up on that top six at the same? Obviously, you don't change the Yamamoto, McDavid, Kane line. That would be just ridiculous. But you keep Puljujarvi up with Draisaitl and Hyman?
Yeah, I think you have to right now. Because I think if you bump him down, that makes it worse from a confidence standpoint, right? Even though Nuge is a hell of a player. And I think...
Yeah, I think Nuge, though, changes that mindset. Like, it doesn't necessarily feel like a 100% of a demotion. If you were to drop him right now to a Fogle, Shore, Ryan line, then yes, it is.
Sure, but you tell me, if you were him and you were playing with Draisaitl and McDavid, you wouldn't look at Nuge as a...
I've just never seen the guy not smiling.
So if he was playing a little, like if he had a little more puck luck, as they say right now, I could see that. And I think at some point we're going to see Puljujarvi down there. I think we might see Hyman down there at times too, especially come playoff time, just by matchups. But right now, that's tough because it was Nuge, Fogle, and Ryan, right?
Yep.
Before he got hurt.
And that line was great.
They were carrying the team for a bit.
Yep.
So do you go back to that? Tough to say because, again, what is Derek Ryan? He was really good while he was hot. He's not a terrible player or anything, but are we expecting him to continue to do that? If we are, that might not be realistic. And then if you do that, then what do you do with McLeod?
And Brassard.
Yeah. And I think Brassard probably starts fourth line. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing if the top six stays intact, whatever formation of it is. I would not be surprised at some point we see Brassard, Nuge, and McLeod potentially at times. But maybe Ryan and McLeod, or McLeod and Fogle. Fogle's weird, man.
Yeah, I mean he's streaky, right? And
I just don't know how useful Fogle is on the fourth line. Like, I guess if you want to just have him and Cassian and whomever go around and hit people, sure. I don't know what that does. I don't think Fogle benefits from playing 6 minutes a night.
No, not at all. Not that many players would.
True.
Completely different style of play, but very similar type of results. Fogle reminds me of like Todd Marchant. Like, he's got the potential to just be outstanding.
Stonehands.
Yeah, but just can't seem to get it done, right? I mean, like obviously they don't play anything like each other, but I mean, no. Marchant must have had 10,000 breakaways in his career, and 2 or 3 goals out of that.
And hey, there's every chance Fogle could turn into what everyone thinks Cassian is come playoff time. Fogle might just wipe the slate clean, go, hey, this is a brand new season, like a lot of guys do, and he simplifies it, goes north-south, hits, uses his speed, because he's a decent player. I just think he's been lost all year. And I don't know. Because you got to get McLeod minutes is how I look at it. So I'd play McLeod with Nuge for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, it would be a real shame if he gets bumped, right?
Would you bump Yessi down?
I'd give him another shot at it, right? Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, you gotta. He was out long enough. He's gotta shoot, right? Like he's gotta shoot the puck, and I'm there's no doubt they're watching video as we speak, and showing him the opportunities he missed tonight because he didn't. It felt like there was a shift tonight where somebody had whispered in his ear, "Jesse, shoot the puck." And he went out and shot a couple, and he had a couple of good opportunities. And then he went back to passing again. And maybe that's just how you got to talk to him is shift by shift. But you got to give him one more shot. I mean, we all know, unless if you got, a stone heart, you got to love Puljujarvi. the guy's, got the infectious smile. He gets out there. He seems to always be giving it his all. Like he just, he doesn't. I never feel like he's mailing it in, right?
No.
And somehow, like I said about Yamo, sometimes he gets the puck and you don't know how. Sometimes he gets the puck through people and you don't know how he did it because it's not as smooth as Connor would do it. And he's got a big shot, and he's in the. Like I hate playing against guys like that. Puljujarvi's in the right place at the right time. That's the only reason we're yelling at him to shoot is because he's in the right place at the right time. And if he does start shooting the puck, they're going to start going in. And I hope that he lights up just in time for playoffs because that would be fun to watch. The one worry that I do have is I felt like Draisaitl was getting annoyed with him. And I felt like there were a couple times tonight where Draisaitl could have passed him the puck and opted not to and deferred to Hyman instead. And maybe I'm just making it up in my head, but that's just it was just the way it felt.
Probably not, but I probably think it's less of I think it was probably more of a frustration thing in the moment. Like think about it when you've played. If you play with guys and you guys are as a group, as a collective, as a team, you're doing whatever. And this dude just won't shoot as an example. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't doubt that there might've been some frustration in the moment, but yeah, that's really all I think it is. But yeah, like, and again, I still look at Puljujarvi still as a kid, man. Like, I think he's still learning to find his NHL legs. So, but injury, a short season last year. So
the numbers don't lie on him, though. I mean, the stats are always good. It doesn't matter how we look at him. Like he's always got good underlying stats.
100%.
And and you got to give him that. Like the puck just doesn't seem to find its way into the defensive zone a lot when he's playing.
Nope.
And it's not because of, offensive zone starts. Like he just has a knack for keeping the puck in the zone. And that's a lot. If you keep the puck in the offensive zone most of the game, you're going to win 9 out of 10
And he's good.
times.
And he's good in the defensive zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of those guys and a lot of those guys in the top 6 are not.
Yeah.
Like you could arguably say he's really I wouldn't say he's the only one, but of the wingers, Hyman's okay. Yamo can be. Kane's terrible defensively. So, that on its own brings something. And as frustrated as, Draisaitl or McDavid might get with things at times, which they would with any player, he covers their ass at times, right? So that can't be, and especially without Nuge there anymore, because that was always one of their wet blankets, so to speak, right? They could go do whatever they wanted, and then they had him there to cover up whatever.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. Like, okay, let's not look at the third goal tonight. Like they busted right through the entire team down the middle. And the first line was on the ice.
Yep.
And the first pair of defense was on the ice. And they looked completely outmatched. Granted, it was one shift. But with those, like I think it was Yamo at the top of the blue line, he got twisted into the ice. He looked like he was caught like in a twister, man. He was going in 3 different directions at once.
Yeah.
So does that happen with Puljujarvi on the ice? Maybe not. Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers just keep pointing to a guy that, does all the right things and doesn't get all the credit with a lot of fans, around the team. All right, I think we're well overdue. Game time is on Thursday and then Flames on Saturday. And my good friend Naim over at Indigenous Rookie Cards reminded me that the Oilers and Flames game this weekend will be available in Cree on APTN.
Excellent.
So that's excellent. That's my heritage. And so pretty excited about that. Make sure to tune in to that. As always, I give my guests the last word. You know the drill. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in again. Another fun episode. Love talking hockey. Great having you on the show, Rob. Definitely have you back. If you want to find Rob, of course, you want to see some of what he's written, which he's putting stuff out all the time on Copper and Blue, and well worth the read. You can find him there or on Twitter at oil_drop. Thanks for being on the show, Rob. You get the last word.
Well, Oilers fans, all I will say in closing is this. It's been a hectic couple of days. I think for the most part, we can't really complain with what they did as an organization. Holland was able to accomplish, because I don't think any of us truly expected anything more. This team is probably better than it was a couple of days ago. I personally think this is a team that's going to end up in second place in the Pacific. So if you're about to jump off that ledge after a couple of losses, take a step back. It's all good. They're not going to win every game. The other thing I always try to remind people at this time of year, while we all like to talk about, they got to win this game. This is a must win. There is no must win this late, this early/late in the season. It's tons of time. They're in a great spot. There's going to be a lot of hiccups along the way. Let's not kid ourselves. This team isn't perfect. That said, I have full confidence in the best players on this team to be able to carry them. So with that, I will say, let's go Oilers. And thank you to Michael for having me on the program. I had a blast and would love to come back. And with that, I bid you all a good night.
Oilers Live.